depressing.
Okay, I'm Etzion from Israel. Today is the 18th of October 2025. Traditionally, we'll start with musical piece to commemorate or to remind us that there is such a thing as spiritual circles where human beings work together. We can work together, perfect accord. That's why I bring it again and again. Maybe somebody will pay it one day. Here you are. It's from one of our, from a year ago. We're participating in a home for elderly home, not far from Haifa. I call it the Kibbutz Yagur. Just a minute. If it was recorded, I kept on speaking, but I forgot to erase it. I don't know. It doesn't matter. After this, before continuing with reading of Baba's Discourses on Sanskaras, I wanted to share. I published a little book which I started to write in Baba's Samadhi during 1983. And it's some short version of the theme of creation in biblical form. Later on, I published it. It was actually a major rehearsal before the publication of the Hebrew Discourses, which I was ordered to accomplish by Keri Ben Shammai, Baba's first disciple in Israel. In this booklet, I published what I call the cosmic engine. And this really brings in a nutshell the entire theme of creation. In one glance, you see the whole sojourn of the soul. Now let me, here it is, and share it. And this is what I call the cosmic engine. Now this illustration also, how I came to it in 1980, I have no idea whatsoever. Ask Baba how it, because I read God Speaks just a little bit, such a diagram doesn't exist there, but basically speaks about the movement of the God beings from the on point. Here, the on point is here. They move through mineral, plants, and animals till we reach the human stage. Here, the human stage, as we can see, the circumference or the size of our consciousness is maximum, but it's full of sanskaras. What is dark? Sanskaras, impressions. Impressions are being stored in our subconscious mind. And if creation will continue moving naturally through us, to human beings, here, the human beings should be directed by this, the last perfect man, the God man, should lead us community, should form a spiritual government on earth, that each one of us should participate, or some of us, or most of us, could have some variations of explanation, might be 10, 20%, 50% of humanity. It doesn't matter the percentage, but there must be any minimum percentage to form spiritual government on earth. You know, the whole world would know that this is our compass, and we have problems. We have to go to this government and share and discuss with them our problems and our issues, how to solve them. And the problems on earth would be minimized to 1% of the problems. 1% of suffering is needed for the forging of the soul. So what happened to us here? We are at what we call the Garden of Eden, the perfect state. We're walking like this symphony, like this orchestra. Millions and billions of us are walking with more or less one accord. Then the music of the spheres would be manifest on earth, and this would create a divine consciousness of humanity. Humans would know, most of them, the purpose of creation, there wouldn't be a question, is there is God or not, or what's going on? But what happened? We decided 1% of suffering is too much for us to bear, and if Mr. God, this is Mr. God on earth, this is a perfect master, or the God man, and you can see it's still on earth, because this is a realm of the physical creation below, and above is a spiritual world, conscious divinity in the waking state, and this is the sleep state. Also notice here the minus and the plus. So this working like a dynamo, like a gigantic dynamo. All beings are being compelled like the electrons. No, if somebody is asking the electron to cause the engine to rotate, and this is an engine which has to rotate all the time. And the avatar is a divine being. From here goes back to us to help us. So what happened? We were in the Garden of Eden state, and we decided that Mr. God, because of this 1% of suffering, is incompetent. And he told Mr. God, you know what, Mr. God? We'll do it better. Go away from here. God didn't expel us from the Garden of Eden or from paradise, or the earthly paradise. We did. We told Mr. God, go away from it. And you can see it. God is not here. And what happened? It became hell. Instead of 1%, we have 100% suffering. And it's, I don't know, it's 1,000,000% suffering. Look at it's a hell which is going on earth at every moment. It's unbelievable. And just imagine the suffering of the animals and the plants of minerals. They're all in stagnation. The animal kingdom suffering, we are aware of because we can see the suffering. But you don't experience suffering of the plants and minerals. They suffer as well. And what happened now? That humans said, instead of going there, we want to go back here. Humans decided to go back to the beyond set. This is the beyond set before the creation. So what that's what we did. So in order to stop it, there must be immense suffering to reduce the sanskaras. You see, when we enter the involution, sanskaras are started to diminish till we reach perfection. And this, of course, it takes some pain and work and suffering. And we wanted just to lie on the Hawaiian beach, and the bananas will fall directly into our mouths, and the wonderful girls will dance before our noses, or vice versa. Or the wonderful boys will dance before the girls, whatever you think is perfection. And this diagram, it appears also on my Meher Baba site. You can find it there. You have to search meherbabaisrael.com, go to the English section and find the articles or something like this under the heading of the story of mankind. I will continue with Baba's discourses. I read the first discourse on sanskaras. Are you hiding? There it is. Removal of sanskaras. Baba says that his expertise in this advent is dealing with sanskaras. Even while I was reading the talks of Upasni Maharaj, Baba's master, and by the way, all the 6 volumes are on my website as well. You can search my website. You will see these talks. They are online. I don't know if it's on the website of the Sakore Ashram. I have no idea what's going on there. I was communicating with them at length in the past, but it's not exactly my business to care about this or to worry about this. There's a problem over there. They do whatever they do. We'll continue reading the Removal of Sanskaras. There are 3 chapters. These are basics. Now I read them dozens of times, each one of them, while I was working on the translation of Hebrew discourses. I had to read it again. Also, I published the 6 discourses of Sanskaras and the ego as a separate pamphlet. And also the Theosophical Society in Israel published the 6 discourses in their monthly magazine during the early 2000s, etc. They're very powerful, and it's a must read for all of us. You need to understand each chapter, 3-4 pages, where we can take this big trouble and read it, really understand it, and implement it. It's a matter of life and death. We either continue the path or we'll go backwards. That's what it is. Human beings do not have self-illumination because the consciousness is shrouded in sanskaras, or the accumulated imprints of past experience. In the human form, the will to be conscious with which evolution started has succeeded in creating consciousness. However, unconsciousness does not arrive at the knowledge of the oversoul, because the individual soul is impelled to use it for experiencing sanskara instead of utilizing it for experiencing the soul's own true nature as the oversoul. The experiencing of sanskaras keeps it confined with the illusion of being a finite body trying to adjust itself in the world of things and persons. Individual souls are like drops in the ocean, just as each drop in the ocean is fundamentally identical with the ocean. The soul, which is individualized due to bahas or illusion, is still the oversoul. It does not really become separate from the oversoul. As the envelope of sanskaras by which consciousness is covered prevents a drop soul from having self-illumination and keeps it within the domain of duality. In order for the soul to consciously realize its identity with the oversoul, it is necessary that consciousness should be retained and that sanskaras should be entirely removed. The sanskaras, which are contributory to the evolution of consciousness, themselves become impediments to its efficacy in illuminating the nature of the oversoul. Henceforth, the problem with which the will to be conscious is confronted is not that of evolving consciousness, but that of releasing it from sanskaras. The release of sanskara takes place in the following 5 ways. 1. The cessation of creating new sanskaras. This consists in putting an end to the ever-renewing activity of creating fresh sanskaras. The formation of sanskaras is compared to the winding of a string around a stick. The step amounts to the cessation of the further winding of the string. The wearing out of all sanskaras. If sanskaras are withheld from expressing themselves in action and experience, they are gradually worn out. In the analogy of the string, this process is comparable to the wearing out of the string at the place where it is. The unwinding of past sanskaras. This process consists in annulling past sanskaras by mentally reversing the process that leads to their formation. Continuing our analogy, it is like unwinding the string. The dispersion and exhaustion of some sanskaras. If the mental energy that is locked up in sanskaras is sublimated and diverted into other channels, they are dispersed and exhausted and tend to disappear. 5. The wiping out of sanskaras. This consists in completely annihilating the sanskaras. The analogy of the string, this is comparable to cutting the string with a pair of scissors. The final wiping out of sanskaras can be effected only by the grace of a perfect master. It should be carefully noted that many of the concrete methods of undoing sanskaras are found to be effective in more than one way, and the 5 ways mentioned above are not meant to classify these methods into sharply distinguished types. They represent rather the different principles characterizing the spiritual processes that take place while sanskaras are being removed. For the sake of convenience, this part will deal only with those methods that preeminently illustrate the first 3 principles, namely the cessation of creating fresh sanskaras and the wearing out and the unwinding of past sanskaras. The methods that predominantly illustrate the last 2 principles, the dispersion and exhaustion through sublimation of sanskaras, The wiping out of sanskaras be explained in parts 2 and 3. If the mind is to be freed from the bondage of ever accumulating sanskaras, it is necessary that there should be an end to the creation of new sanskaras. Fresh multiplication of sanskaras can be stopped through renunciation. Renunciation may be external or internal. External or physical, renunciation consists in giving up everything to which the mind is attached: home, parents, marriage, children, friends, wealth, comforts, and gross enjoyments. Internal or mental renunciation consists in giving up on cravings, particularly the craving for sensual objects, meaning lust, basically. That's the toughest. And judgment. There is both these two systems was terrible, very hard addictions. Though external renunciation itself is not necessarily accompanied by internal renunciation, it often paves a way for internal renunciation. Spiritual freedom consists in internal renunciation and not in external renunciation, but external renunciation is a great aid in achieving internal renunciation. The person who renounces his possessions disconnects himself from everything that he had or has. This means that the things he renounces are no longer a source of fresh sanskaras. He thus takes an important step toward emancipating himself from his sanskaras by putting an end to the process of forming new sanskaras. This is not all that is achieved through external renunciation. With the renouncing of everything, he also renounces his past bindings. The old sanskaras connected with his possessions get detached from his mind, and since they are withheld from expressing themselves, they get worn out. For most persons, external renunciation creates a favorable atmosphere for the wearing out of sanskaras. An individual who possesses wealth and power is exposed to a life of indulgence and extravagance. The circumstances are more favorable for temptations. Mine is mostly what he becomes by being chopped, chiseled, and shaped by the sculptor of environment. Whether or not he can surmount his surroundings depends upon his strength of character. If he is strong, he remains free in his thought and action. Even in the midst of action and reaction with this environment, if he is weak, he succumbs to its influence. Even if he is strong, he is likely to be swept off his feet by a powerful wave of the collective mode of life and thought. It is difficult to withstand the onslaught of a current of ideas and avoid falling prey to circumstances. If he resists the circumstances, he is likely to be carried away by some wild wave of collective passion and get caught up in modes of thought that he is unable to renounce. Though it is difficult to resist and overcome these influences and surroundings, it is easier to escape from them. Many persons would live a chaste and straightforward life if they were not surrounded by luxuries and temptations. The renunciation of all superfluous things helps the wearing out of sanskaras, and is therefore contributory to the life of freedom. The two important forms of external renunciation that have special spiritual value are solitude and fasting. Withdrawal of oneself from the storm and stress of the multifarious worldly activities, in occasional retirement into solitude are valuable for wearing out the sanskaras connected with a gregarious instinct, but is not to be looked upon as a goal in itself. Like solitude, fasting also has great spiritual value. Eating is satisfaction. Fasting is denial. Fasting is physical when food is not taken, in spite of the craving for the enjoyment of eating. It is mental when food is taken not for its delights and attachments, but merely for the survival of the body. Silent fasting consists in avoiding direct contact with food in order to achieve mental fasting. Food is a direct necessity of life, and its continued denial is bound to be disastrous to health. Therefore, external fasting should be periodical and only for a short time. It has to be continued till there is complete victory of the craving for food. By bringing into action the vital forces to withstand the craving for food, it is possible to free the mind from attachment to food. External fasting has no spiritual value when it is undertaken with the motive of securing the health of the body or for the sake of self-demonstration. It should be used as an instrument for self-assertion. In the same way, it should not be carried to the extreme until the body is reduced to its limits. Self-mortification through prolonged fasting does not necessarily promote freedom from the craving for food. On the contrary, it is likely to invite a subsequent reaction toward a life of extravagant indulgence in food. If, however, external fasting is undertaken in moderation and for spiritual purposes, it facilitates the achievement of internal fasting. When external and internal fasting are wholehearted and faithful, they bring about the unwinding of the sanskaras connected with the craving for food. The unwinding of many other sanskaras can be brought about through penance. This consists in augmenting and expressing the feeling of remorse an individual feels after realizing that he has done some wrongful act. Repentance consists in mentally reviving the wrongs with severe self-condemnation. It is facilitated by availing oneself of the different circumstances and situations that stir up penance, or by remaining vulnerable during periods of emotional outbursts, or by deliberate efforts to recall the past incidents with a remorseful heart and acute disapproval. Such penance unwinds the sanskaras that are responsible for the action. Self-condemnation accompanied by deep feeling can negate sanskaras of anger, greed, and lust. Suppose a person has done irreparable wrong to someone through uncontrolled greed, anger, or lust. Sometime or other he is bound to have the reaction of self-killing, remorse, and experience the pricks of conscience. If at this time he vividly realizes the evil for which he was responsible, the intensity of emotional awareness by which it is accompanied consumes the tendencies for which he stands self-condemned. Self-condemnation sometimes expresses itself through different forms of self-mortification. Some aspirants even inflict wounds on the body when they are in a mood of penitence. But such drastic expression of remorse must be discouraged as a general usage. Some Hindu aspirants try to cultivate humility by making it a rule to fall at the feet of everyone whom they meet. To those of strong will and stable character, penance can bring the desired good effect, so self-humiliation, which unwinds and eradicates the different sanskaras connected with good and bad actions. Others who might be feeble in their willpower also derive benefit from penance if they are under sympathetic and loving direction. When penance is carefully nourished and practiced, it inevitably results in the mental revocation of undesirable modes of thought and conduct. It makes one amenable to a life of purity and service. It should, however, be carefully noted that there is always a danger in penance that the mind might dwell too long upon the wrongs done and thus develop the morbid habit of wailing and weeping over petty things. Such sentimental extravagance is often an indiscriminate waste of energy and is in no way helpful in the wearing out or the unwinding of sanskaras. Penance should not be like the everyday repentance that follows everyday weaknesses. It should not become a tedious and sterile habit of immoderate and gloomy pondering over one's own failings. Sincere penance does not consist in perpetuating grief for the wrongs, but in resolving to avoid in the future those deeds that call forth remorse. If it leads to a lack of self-respect or self-confidence, it has not served its true purpose, which is merely to render impossible the repetition of certain types of action. The wearing out and unwinding of sanskaras can also be affected by denying the desires their expression and fulfillment. People differ in their capacity and aptitude for rejecting desires. Those in whom desires arise with great impulsive velocity are unable to curb them at their source, but they can refrain from seeking their fulfillment through action. Even if someone has no control over the surging of desires, he can prevent them from being translated into action. Rejection of desires by controlling actions avoids the possibility of sowing seeds of future desires. On the other hand, if a person translates his desires into action, he may spend up and exhaust some impressions, but he is creating fresh impressions during the very process of fulfilling the desires and is thus sowing seeds of future desires, which in their turn are bound to demand their own satisfaction. The process of spending up or exhausting impressions through expression and fulfillment does not in itself contribute toward securing release from sanskaras. When desires arise and their release into action is birthed, there is plenty of opportunity for spontaneous cogitation about these desires. This cogitation results in the wearing out of their corresponding sanskaras. It should be noted, however, that such spontaneous cogitation does not bring about the desired result if it takes the form of mental indulgence in the desires. When there is a deliberate and wanton attempt to welcome and harbor the desires in the mind, such cogitation will not only have no spiritual value, but may itself be responsible for creating subtle sanskaras. Cogitation should not be accompanied by any conscious sanction for the desires that arise in consciousness. There should not be any effort to perpetuate the memory of these desires. When desires are denied their expression and fulfillment in action and are allowed to pass through the intensity of the fire of a cogitative consciousness, does not sanction them, the seeds of these desires are consumed. The rejection of desires and the inhibition of physical response effect in time, an automatic and natural negation of the past sanskaras. Rejection of desires is the preparation for desirelessness, or the state of non-wanting, which alone can bring about the true freedom. Wanting is necessarily binding, whether it is fulfilled or not. When it is fulfilled, it leads to further wanting and thus perpetuates the bondage of the spirit. When it is unfulfilled, it leads to disappointment and suffering, which through their sanskaras fetter the freedom of the spirit in their own way. There is no end to wanting, because external and internal stimuli of the mind are constantly alluring it into a state of wanting or disliking, which is another form of wanting something. The external stimuli are the sensations of sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The internal stimuli are those that arise in the mind of man from the memories of the present life and totality of sanskaras gathered by consciousness during the evolutionary period and during human lives. When the mind is trained to remain unmoved and balanced in the presence of all external and internal stimuli, it arrives at the state of non-wanting. And by not wanting anything except the absolute reality, which is beyond the opposites of stimuli, it is possible to unwind the sanskaras of wanting. Wanting is a state of disturbed equilibrium of mind, and non-wanting, the state of stable poise. The poise of non-wanting can only be maintained by an unceasing disentanglement from all stimuli, whether pleasant or painful, agreeable or disagreeable, in order to remain unmoved by the joys and sorrows of this world. The mind must be completely detached from the external and internal stimuli. So the mind is constantly fortifying itself through its own constructive suggestions. There's always a chance of these outposts of defense being washed away by some sudden and unexpected wave arising in the ocean of the natural and mental environment. When this happens, you may, for a time, feel completely lost. But the attitude of non-attachment can keep you safe. This attitude consists in the application of the principle of neti-neti. Not this, not this. It implies constant effort to maintain a watchful detachment in relation to the alluring opposites of limited experience. It is not possible to deny only the disagreeable stimuli and remain inwardly attached to the agreeable stimuli. If the mind is to remain unmoved by the onslaughts of the opposites, it cannot continue to be attached to the expressions of agreeable stimuli and be influenced by them. The equipoise consists in meeting both alternatives with complete detachment. The yes meaning of the positive sanskaras can only be annulled to the negative assertion of no. This negative element is necessarily present in all aspects of asceticism, as expressed through renunciation, solitude, fasting, penance, withholding desires from fulfillment, and non-wanting. The happy blending of all these methods and attitudes creates a healthy form of asceticism in which there is no toil or exertion. But to ensure all this, the negative element in them must come naturally, without giving rise to any perversions or further limitations. Trying to coerce the mind to a life of asceticism is of no use. Any forcible adjustment of life on ascetic lines is likely to stunt the growth of some good qualities. When the healthy qualities of human nature are allowed to develop naturally and slowly, they unfold the knowledge of relative values and thereby paves the way for a spontaneous life of asceticism. Whereas any attempt to force or hasten the mind toward an ascetic life is likely to invite reaction. The process of being freed from some attachments is often accompanied by the process of forming some other new attachments. The grossest form of attachment is that which is directed to the world of objects. But when the mind is being detached from the world of objects, it has a tendency to arrive at some finer attachments of a subjective kind. After the mind has succeeded in cultivating a certain degree of detachment, it might easily develop that subtle form of egotism which expresses itself through aloofness and a superior error. Attachment should not be allowed to form any nucleus upon which the ego could fasten itself, and at the same time, it should not be an expression of one's inability to cope with the storm and stress of worldly life. The things that limit pure and infinite being should be given up through an attitude of immense strength, which is born of purity and enlightenment, and not from a sense of helplessness in the face of strife and struggle. Further, true detachment does not consist in clinging to the mere formula of neti-neti, which sometimes becomes an obsession of the mind. Without any deep felt longing for enlightenment, such interest in a mere formula of negation often exists side by side with an inward dwelling on the temptations. Detachment can be integral and wholehearted only when it becomes an inseparable part of one's nature. The negative assertion of no is the only way of unwinding the positive sanskaras gathered through evolution in human lives. Although this process does destroy the positive sanskaras, it results in the formation of the negative sanskaras, which in their own way condition the mind and create a new problem. The assertion of no has to be sufficiently powerful to effect the eradication of all the physical, subtle, and mental sanskaras. But after it has served its purpose, it has to be ultimately abandoned. The finality of spiritual experience does not consist of pure negation. To bring it under a negative formula is to limit it by means of an intellectual concept. The negative formula has to be used by the mind to decondition itself, but it must be renounced before the ultimate goal of life can be attained. So, has to be made use, thought has to be made use of in order to overcome the limitations set up by its own movement. But when this is done, it has itself to be given up. It amounts to the process of going beyond the mind, and this becomes possible through non-identification with the mind or its desires, to look objectively upon the body, as well as all thoughts and lower impulses, is to get established in blissful detachment and to negate all sanskaras. This means freeing the soul from its self-imposed illusions, like I am the body, I am the mind, or I am desire, and getting gone toward the enlightened stage of I am God. Aham Brahmasmi. This was the first discourses of removal of sanskara. A little bit long, Now, such a discourse cannot be understood or be consumed or be, I would call it, implement our lives just by one reading. To understand just this one simple discourse, first of all, so simple, it's very condensed, actually intensely condensed, and it might take a few lifespans just to understand this one discourse. And if you think in one life you can understand the entire three discourses, we're deluding ourselves. Now what it is, it sounds like a hopeless case. So I would suggest, from my experience, to start to work on, take, for example, taking your food. Instead of eating every day at 12 or 1, postpone it for 10 minutes or half an hour. That's all. If you get mad at somebody, try to restrain himself to tell him what you think about him. Just leave him alone. That's the best thing. Then you don't get detached, because you get angry at him because he did something bad to you, but it's because you react, you increase a lot of sanskaras within yourself. When we complain and judge somebody else, we're increasing the load of unnatural sanskaras, upon us unnatural sanskaras. I call any sanskara which deviates us from the goal of achieving the final goal, as we saw in the cosmic engine, when we merge consciously with divine, which is our inherent duty with service. All of us, we have to be there sooner or later, and better sooner. And the very fact we have, for example, the avatar came in our midst and he's telling us, you have to learn to surrender to the perfect master, to the director of the musical band. If you would work like a musical band, which I could call it, this is actually an exemplification of spiritual circles, then we would learn how to work together on these sanskaras, unwind them naturally. In all this world, whatsoever we do, especially when we react and judge, especially getting involved with judging politicians, that's really one of the worst kind of sanskaras. Besides the sanskaras of promiscuity, getting involved with endless partners. And I think there are some people who set it for them as a goal to have 10,000 physical relations with 10,000 partners. So for each partner, they might have to spend a few lifespans just to unwind these sanskaras. So we will prescribe with one lifespan of indulging in selfishness and gratification, millions of years of suffering. Then we come back and suffer. They die of starvation, they're being burnt alive, they get killed in wars. And then you come, there's so much suffering in the world, but all these humans brought it upon themselves. But we, because we cannot see the round of all these circles of life on earth and its consequences, we judge the Lord as a bad God. But people who did bad things must come and pay it. But it's the grace of the Lord who allows us to pay our debts. Otherwise, we'll be lost. We're lost forever. So he's not willing to give up on us. So he allows this terrible suffering. And all of us who want peace, they don't understand the problem of sanskaras. And as long as there won't be what we call the spiritual government on earth, wars will continue, and as an indication that we spiritual people refuse to form this spiritual government. That's you can doubt what I'm saying, but you're going to find out. Come back in 2,000 years and see what it is. That's the way it got to be. Last time we tried to do it, established it during the 3,000 years ago with Master Moses. We told Master Moses, all of us, we shared the, whether we were there physically or spiritually, it doesn't matter. But we told him we want to go back to Egypt. What's the meaning in Hebrew? But eventually they totally rebelled against Moses at a certain point. And then the Lord went, our Baba, the avatar, was guiding all this. He really went mad. You know, we have stories of our Baba, Meher Baba, going really berserk, and all the Mandali would flee to their shelters, especially in the Manzil in the first years when he was very robust and fiery. Later, as if he calmed down, he was simply, and then at a certain point, the children of Israel became completely rebellious. The people started to incinerate. The people were being torched. They were aflame. The Lord started to burn the humanity. He wants to get rid of them. Moses stood before him like this. Stop it. Told him. Moses, a lot. Moses is a principle. He's the only being in the universe that could stop the rage of the Lord. And that's why the whole this world is here. He was not a perfect master. But he was one of those beings that the Lord cannot say no to him. There are such people. It's enough to do with spiritual advancement. As the Moses stood before the Lord, stop it, calm down. And he did. You can see it in my skits. I wrote a skit you can see meherbabaisrael.com, and in English sections I wrote skits. There is a skit I call, I think, Giordano Bruno, or something like this. And there, Baba, the gods, Giordano Bruno was burnt on the stake in the year 1600, not because he committed some horrendous crimes against humanity, or let's say did all kind of horrible things for little girls, but because he said all kinds of thoughts which contradicted the norm of the church. Then they burnt you alive. Can you believe this church of the Yehoshua of Nazareth, whom you call Jesus, the person who was teaching peace and vegetarianism, etc., and non-violence, and in his name, these mad people ushered crusades and killing people and burning people on the stake, and still the same Christians till now, the same people. So, by the way, the Inquisition, the tortured people, they broke all their bodies, and the instruments are still there in the Vatican or other churches. The office of Inquisition is still there. They didn't close it. And they never apologized or repented for what they did. And you can see it in other religions, in other current religion, which is some of it based on violent abomination, and they really believe it's the will of God, something to do with God. To conclude all this session, we came here, all of us, to the session of the Avatar. Don't need to worry about Sanskaras. Don't need to worry about this. I understood this chapter or not. Did it another 10 times or 50 times as I did. And what I did, I started to implement. I took here and there, let's say, postponed eating or learn to stop judging and getting angry, and basically to give everything to you. That's my training in this life. Don't hate, don't feel something negative within yourself towards somebody, even he insulted you, abused you, cheated you, whatsoever. Just cleanse it within yourself by giving all these impressions to Baba and leave it to him. Who knows? Maybe you have to pay a debt from a million years ago. How do you know? Only the Avatar knows. We don't know. I don't judge anyone. Don't judge the politicians, especially. That's the worst habit. We're judging all the time. I can see it from the Baba levels because I'm associated with them over the Facebook pages. So I see what they're saying. I don't understand what they're doing. I really don't understand it. They will lose this Advent. All the people who judge cannot stop judging. I don't like this one. Which kind is this? I think this should be the nominated president, or this is a good king, or this is a bad king, or this is. I like it. You will lose the benefits of Advent, meaning the benefits of Advent. They will keep on moving on the spiritual path till reach the goal. Just to stick to the Avatar. This is I call it the one and only binding sanskaras, which we should never relinquish, to be bound to the beloved. Then you're bound once, forget the rest. You don't need to think about sanskaras anymore. But all these discourses, some few generation would know, would lose any feeling for the perfect masters and the Avatar. This will be this miracle. One of the avatars will be willing to manifest in public. They simply don't like to do it. From the past, often being harassed and abused, people come from them. Not to help them. If you want to come to the orbit of a perfect master, you come to do what? To help him in his work, to share his burden, or you want to throw your burden on him? And many of us are looking for who is the perfect master? Who is the guy who will take my suffering on himself? I went to Baba. What happened to me? In my instance, I wanted to remove his burden a little bit. I will not be at least a burden. That was my motive. Maybe that's why I keep on giving all kinds of inspirations, because I chose to share his work for whatever I can. I never was requested to do something above my capabilities. It never happened. I do whatever I can. It's not the best, it is whatever it is. That's all. See you next week. Bye.